a WikiVidi documentaries production. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Enjoy. God Save the Queen. God Save the Queen is the national or royal anthem in a number of Commonwealth realms, their territories, and the British Crown dependencies. The author of the tune is unknown, and it may originate in plainchant, but an attribution to the composer John Bull is sometimes made. It is the national anthem of the United Kingdom and one of two national anthems used by New Zealand since 1977, as well as, for several of the UK's territories that have their own additional local anthem. It is also the royal anthem played specifically in the presence of the monarch of all the aforementioned countries, as well as Australia, Canada, Barbados, and Tuvalu. In countries not previously part of the British Empire, the tune of God Save the Queen has provided the basis for various patriotic songs, though still generally connected with royal ceremony. The melody continues to be used for the national anthem of Liechtenstein, Oben and Rhein, and the royal anthem of Norway, Kongesangen. In the United States, the melody is used for the patriotic song, My Country, 'Tis of Thee. Beyond its first verse, which is consistent, God Save the Queen/King, has many historic and extant versions. Since its first publication, different verses have been added and taken away, and, even today, different publications include various selections of verses in various orders. In general, only one verse is sung. Sometimes two verses are sung, and on rare occasions, three. The sovereign and her or his spouse are saluted with the entire composition, while other members of the royal family who are entitled to royal salute receive just the first 6 bars. The first 6 bars also form all or part of the vice-regal salute in some Commonwealth realms outside the UK, as well as the salute given to governors of British overseas territories. History. In the Oxford Companion to Music, Percy Scholes points out the similarities to an early plain-song melody, although the rhythm is very distinctly that of a galliard, and he gives examples of several such dance tunes that bear a striking resemblance to God Save the King/Queen. Scholes quotes a keyboard piece by John Bull which has some similarities to the modern tune, depending on the placing of accidentals which at that time were unwritten in certain cases and left to the discretion of the player. He also points to several pieces by Henry Purcell, one of which includes the opening notes of the modern tune, setting the words, God Save the King. 19th century scholars and commentators mention the widespread belief that an old Scots carol, Remember O Thou Man, was the source of the tune. The first published version of what is almost the present tune appeared in 1744 in Thesaurus Musicus. The 1744 version of the song was popularised in Scotland and England the following year, with the landing of Charles Edward Stuart, and was published in the Gentleman's Magazine. This manuscript has the tune apart from that which is used today at several points. One as early as the first bar, but is otherwise clearly a strong relative of the contemporary anthem. It was recorded as being sung in London theatres in 1745, with, for example, Thomas Arne writing a setting of the tune for the Drury Lane Theatre. Scholes' analysis includes mention of untenable and doubtful claims, as well as an American misattribution. Some of these are: Scholes recommends the attribution, traditional, or traditional. Earliest known version by John Bull. The English hymnal gives no attribution, stating merely 17th or 18th cent. Use in the United Kingdom. God Save the Queen is the national anthem of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Like many aspects of British constitutional life, its official status derives from custom and use, not from royal proclamation or Act of Parliament. In general, only 1 or 2 verses are sung, but on rare occasions, 3. The variation in the UK of the lyrics to God Save the Queen is the oldest amongst those currently used, and forms the basis on which all other versions used throughout the Commonwealth are formed. Though, again, the words have varied throughout these years. England has no official national anthem of its own. God Save the Queen is treated as the English national anthem when England is represented at sporting events. There is a movement to establish an English national anthem, with Blake and Parry's Jerusalem, and Elgar's Land of Hope and Glory among the top contenders. Scotland has its own national song and Wales has its own national anthem for political and national events and for use at international football, rugby union and other sports in which those nations compete independently. On all occasions Wales' national anthem is Hen Wlad Fi Hadau. Scotland has no single anthem. Scotland the Brave was traditionally used until the 1990s, when Flower of Scotland was adopted. In Northern Ireland, God Save the Queen is still used as the official anthem. The phrase, No Surrender, is occasionally sung in the bridge before Send Her Victorious by England football fans at matches. The phrase, No Surrender, is also associated with Combat 18, a white supremacist group. The phrase is also associated with Ulster loyalism and can sometimes be heard at the same point before Northern Ireland football matches. Since 2003, God Save the Queen, considered an all-inclusive anthem for Great Britain and Northern Ireland, as well as other countries within the Commonwealth, has been dropped from the Commonwealth Games. Northern Irish athletes receive their gold medals to the tune of the Londonderry Air, popularly known as Danny Boy. In 2006, English winners heard Elgar's Pomp and Circumstance March No. 1, usually known as Land of Hope and Glory, but after a poll conducted by the Commonwealth Games Council for England prior to the 2010 Games, Jerusalem was adopted as England's new Commonwealth Games anthem. In sports in which the UK competes as one nation, most notably as Great Britain at the Olympics, God Save the Queen is used to represent anyone or any team that comes from the United Kingdom. Lyrics in the UK. The phrase, God Save the King, is much older than the song, appearing, for instance, several times in the King James Bible, a text based on the first book of Kings chapter 1, verses 38-40. And all the people rejoiced and said, God save the King. Long live the King. May the King live forever, Amen, has been sung at every coronation since that of King Edgar in 973. Scholes says that as early as 1545, God Save the King was a watchword of the Royal Navy, with the response being, Long to reign over us. He also notes that the prayer read in churches on anniversaries of the gunpowder plot includes words which might have formed part of the basis for the second verse, Scatter our enemies. Assuage their malice and confound their devices. In 1745, the Gentleman's Magazine published, God Save Our Lord the King, a new song set for two voices, describing it as sung at both playhouses. Traditionally, the first performance was thought to have been in 1745, when it was sung in support of King George II, after his defeat at the Battle of Prestonpans, by the army of Charles Edward Stuart, son of James Francis Edward Stuart, the Jacobite claimant to the British throne. It is sometimes claimed that, ironically, the song was originally sung in support of the Jacobite cause. The word, send, in the line, Send him victorious, could imply that the king was absent. However, the Oxford English Dictionary cites examples of, God, send safe, victorious, etc. meaning, God grant that he may be safe, etc. There are also examples of early 18th century Jacobean drinking glasses which are inscribed with a version of the words, and were apparently intended for drinking the health of King James II and VII. Scholes acknowledges these possibilities, but argues that the same words were probably being used by both Jacobite and Hanoverian supporters and directed at their respective kings. In 1902, the musician William Hayman Cummings, quoting mid-18th century correspondence between Charles Burney and Sir Joseph Banks, proposed that the words were based on a Latin verse composed for King James II at the Chapel Royal. Standard version in the United Kingdom. There is no definitive version of the lyrics. However, the version consisting of the three verses reproduced in the box on the right-hand side has the best claim to be regarded as the standard British version, appearing not only in the 1745 Gentleman's Magazine, but also in publications such as the Book of English Songs, from the 16th to the 19th century, National Hymns, How They Are Written and How They Are Not Written, Household Book of Poetry, and Hymns Ancient and Modern, Revised Version. The same version with verse 2 omitted appears in publications including Scouting for Boys, and on the British Monarchy website. At the Queen's Golden Jubilee party at the Palace concert, Prince Charles referred in his speech to the politically incorrect second verse of the national anthem. According to Alan Mitchell's rule, Britannia, which was published in 1952, after the death of King George VI, but before the coronation of Queen Elizabeth II. When the First General Assembly of the United Nations was held in London in January 1946, the King, in honor of the occasion, ordered the belligerent imperious second stanza of God Save the King to be rewritten, to bring it more into the spirit of the Brotherhood of Nations. In the UK, the first verse is the only verse typically sung, even at official occasions, although the third verse is sung in addition on rare occasions such as during the opening ceremonies of the 2012 Summer Olympics and 2012 Summer Paralympics, and usually at the last night of the proms. At the closing ceremony of the 2008 Beijing Olympics, the fourth verse of the William Hickson alternative lyrics was sung instead of the third verse. Standard version of the music. The standard version of the melody and its key of G major are still those of the originally published version, although the start of the anthem is often signaled by an introductory timpani roll of 2 bars length. The bass line of the standard version differs little from the second voice part shown in the original, and there is a standard version in 4-part harmony for choirs. The first 3 lines are soft, ending with a short crescendo into "Send her victorious," and then is another crescendo at "Over us," into the final words, "God Save the Queen." In the early part of the 20th century there existed a military band version in the higher key of B, because it was easier for brass instruments to play in that key, though it had the disadvantage of being more difficult to sing. However, now most bands play it in the correct key of G. Since 1953, the anthem is sometimes preceded by a fanfare composed by Gordon Jacob for the coronation of Queen Elizabeth II. Alternative British versions. There have been several attempts to improve the song by rewriting the words. In the 19th century there was some lively debate about the national anthem and, even then, verse 2 was considered to be slightly offensive. Notably, the question arose over the phrase, "scatter her enemies." Some thought it placed better emphasis on the respective power of Parliament and the Crown to change her to our. Others pointed out that the theology was somewhat dubious and substituted thine instead. Sidney G. R. Coles wrote a completely new version, as did Canon F. K. Harvard. In 1836, William Edward Hickson wrote 4 alternative verses. The first, third, and fourth of these verses are appended to the national anthem in the English hymnal. Brought to you by WikiVidi documentaries. Would you like to know more?